Hello and welcome to the Dan Regan Hypnotherapy podcast. Now, one of the questions I'm asked surprisingly often by my anxiety clients is, why does anxiety feel so overwhelming when everyone keeps telling them that it's just anxiety? And if anxiety is something you've ever struggled with, you'll have heard some of those phrases. You'll have been told to just stop worrying about it. Stop worrying, everything's fine, you just need to calm down. And while these might be well-meaning and well-intentioned and wanting the best for you, and they might give a bit of reassurance for a little bit maybe, the same pattern of anxious, unwanted, worst-case scenarios, those physical sensations of anxiety, the whole pattern still keeps going, doesn't it? And after working with hundreds of people experiencing anxiety over the years, I've noticed something interesting. Because often it isn't just the anxiety that's causing distress. There's the pattern of anxiety with all the worst case scenarios, the catastrophizing where your mind just runs away with all sorts of uncomfortable, unpleasant, negative thoughts in your imagination. There's also the unpleasant, unwanted physical sensations where your chest feels tight, your heart is racing, you feel hot, tense, restless. Certainly the pattern of anxiety keeps running, but on top of that, there's another pattern that reinforces the pattern of anxiety itself, and that's the kind of stuff that you understandably believe that anxiety means, like what it means about you, to you, that keeps even more worrying, stress, anxiety running throughout. So today I'd like to share 5 of the biggest misunderstandings I come across in my work. Because once these misunderstandings begin to change, anxiety starts to lose some of its grip, some of its power that it currently has over your thoughts, feelings and behaviours. And so the first misunderstanding that people sometimes have is that anxiety means that you're weak, you're broken, there's something wrong with you in some way. I mean, even today, I still occasionally hear people suggest that anxiety isn't a real thing, that you just need to get on with it, or you just need to pull yourself together. Thankfully, views like that are dying out because we understand anxiety far better than we once did. Because it isn't a sign of weakness or something being wrong with you, you're not broken in any way. It's just a sign that your nervous system is really working hard to try and protect you from some perceived threat that it's identified. Logically, you may know there is no threat, but when the emotion takes over, the ability to reason, to think logically, to calmly evaluate things just evaporates. Your nervous system is trying to protect you, but sometimes that protection system becomes a little overprotective. And that's very different, very, very different from being weak or being broken or thinking that there's something wrong with you in some way. And something I've noticed after working with hundreds of people with anxiety is they're often far harder on themselves than they would ever be on somebody else. So learning to replace self-criticism and being harsh on yourself with a calmness and understanding of what's going on is often where recovery and feeling better and changing those anxious patterns really begins. And misunderstanding too is that every anxious thought deserves your attention. And this is very much one I can relate to personally from all the years I struggled with anxiety and social anxiety. I can remember so many times when I used to worry before social events or work events about how I might make an idiot of myself or mess up somehow and that I was going to be judged and what people might think about me. I'd feel sick and hot and on high alert before events about what might happen. And then after events, I'd replay things over and over, becoming more and more convinced that I'd said something or done something, that people were actually judging me or thinking badly of me in some way. And of course, anxiety doesn't stop there. It takes those things and then starts running them forward, where everything continues just getting worse and worse and worse. When I'll see those people, when I'll be there at work, what people will be thinking, it's going to be terrible. They're thinking I'm an idiot. I'm not going to be able to stay here. I'm going to have to move on. I have to leave town. I'm going to lose my job. All those kind of even worst case scenarios can just keep running and running and running until the ultimate disasters are just filling your mind. Because in my head, all these things would build up until there was something huge and completely convincing. I mean, looking back, there wasn't any actual evidence. There was nothing to actually support the kind of things that I was focusing on, imagining, and all the worst case scenarios and what other people think and the anxious thoughts. But anxiety will come up with something. It conjures it up. Your focus, your imagination, your emotions latch onto it, and it just starts to fill in the gaps where it seems like it's a thing, but it's not actually a thing. But of course, we are not used to challenging the original thought. We just have to try and cope with anxiety with everything that follows on from it as it just gets worse and worse inside of our own heads. And this pattern is something I see with clients when I'm working with them. A thought gets in their heads, it feels convincing, it takes over the focus, it seems so much bigger inside our own heads, doesn't it, in our imagination. We get those kind of feelings, the butterflies in the stomach, the heart racing, we feel tense as all these things roll through our minds. And with anxiety, there will always be something that will roll through your mind, and they start to become very convincing. Not because they're true, but because they just take over focus, imagination, and they somehow seem like they're things because of how forceful and powerful they seem inside our own minds. So one of the most helpful questions you can ask yourself is, as you hold up these thoughts in your mind and actually consider the original thought, is this thing a fact, or is your anxious mind just overprotecting you? Is it just trying to keep you safe but in an unhelpful, overwhelming way? Or my favorite, which is one I share with all my clients, is one I use myself when my thoughts start running too far into the future, is to ask myself, is what I'm thinking here a fact with evidence to support it? And by evidence, I should be able to point at it. Just because I thought it is not evidence. That doesn't make it a fact just because I thought it. It should have something to back it up, some substance to it that I can point to and go, there it is carved in stone. Or is it not a fact? And is it just that my mind is making up something about this thing here? Because if I'm making up something, then I may as well make up something far nicer, far more positive, far more empowering, that makes me feel better to think it around this stuff. So is what I'm thinking a fact, or am I just making up stuff in an anxious way inside my head? And then we have misunderstanding 3, and that's that physical symptoms mean something terrible is happening. You get a racing heart, you feel dizzy, there's tingling, there might be shaking, you feel hot, tense, restless, your chest gets tight, and these sensations can feel incredibly uncomfortable and frightening. You might worry about there's something wrong or what it means. You can start to anticipate, are they happening? Become sort of super focused. Is that a sign that my heart is beginning to race? Is there something going on here? You anticipate it, you look for the signs of it, you notice it. When you notice it, that triggers even more anxiety, so you get even more physical symptoms, and that whole cycle keeps running. But while these sensations can feel incredibly frightening, they're just signs of an activated nervous system, rather than proof that something terrible is happening. Now, understanding that doesn't necessarily make the symptoms suddenly vanish or disappear immediately, but what it does do is remove the second layer of fear, and that's the fear of the symptoms themselves, and that can make a huge difference to feeling better and moving forward positively. And moving on to misunderstanding 4, and that's that avoiding anxiety keeps you safe. Avoidance is the number one strategy that people use when they have anxiety to try and cope with it. It's something I see in pretty much every anxious client that I help. And if you avoid something that causes you to feel anxious, whether that's looking at something, watching something, talking about something, hearing about it, going somewhere, doing something, then that avoidance of the thing that's creating the anxiety and that makes you feel anxious even when you think about it does bring short-term relief. You feel better for a bit because you don't have to go and do that thing. But it also keeps you stuck because the pattern of anxiety continues to run around those kind of things. It's certainly something that I used to do. For example, I can remember times when in my old job, I had to go in and do a presentation, and the thought of it would take over my mind. The closer it got, the more it would dominate my thoughts. I would get that feeling in my stomach, that sinking, sick kind of feeling. So I would often just phone up and say, I'll just make up that I'm ill in some way and couldn't go in, so I didn't have to do it. That made me feel better for a bit because I didn't have to think around any of that stuff. That stress just evaporated for a period. But of course, the same thing came in exactly in the same way the next time I was asked to do a presentation on something else. And I can think of a client I worked with recently who had gradually stopped because of their anxiety, going out and seeing friends and family and doing more and more things because they were so worried their anxiety would become so overwhelming. And of course, every time they avoided that situation, they got that temporary relief. Like, I don't have to do that thing. I feel so much better in this moment. But over time, everything started to become more challenging. Going out, seeing people, doing things. Their world became smaller. Everything became more overwhelming, more anxiety provoking. And that really is one of the things that avoidance does so incredibly well. It brings that short-term comfort from the anxious thoughts and feelings, but it quietly strengthens that fear in the long term. Things start to become harder to cope with, you avoid more things, you miss out on things that you want to be doing. And one of the things I've certainly learnt over the years of working with people with anxiety is that recovery and progress and feeling better start when you begin taking small, manageable, positive steps. You set the next small little step, you nudge it forward, you accomplish that, then you do the next one, and you build momentum without ever having to overwhelm yourself to the point where you just don't want to do anything. You take little, positive, progressive, manageable steps and accomplish those and build, and in no time at all, you're just feeling better and better. You're taking action on those areas where anxiety had previously persuaded you that you should avoid, that would bring negative consequences and unwanted thoughts and feelings and so on. And the fifth and final misunderstanding that I want to talk about today is that recovery means that you'll never feel anxious ever again. When I meet someone and I start to work with them to help them with their anxiety, one of the things they often tell me when I ask them what their goals are is that they never want to experience anxiety ever again. And perhaps one of the biggest misunderstandings of all is believing that anxiety means that you'll never experience anxiety again. And I don't know about you, but I've never met anybody who never feels anxious. Now, we very much want to get to a point where you only experience anxiety where it's reasonable or appropriate to whatever is going on, and we very much do want to get rid of irrational, overwhelming, unnecessary anxiety. But anxiety is a normal human emotion, so recovery isn't about never feeling anxious. It's about anxiety no longer dominating your life, making your decisions for you, and stopping you from doing things that you know you're capable of doing. It's about being able to enjoy life, and even when anxiety occasionally turns up, knowing that you can handle it. And in my experience, that's a much healthier, more empowering, and much more achievable goal. So as we bring this episode to a close, if there's one thing I'd like you to remember from today's episode, it's this. Much of what makes anxiety feel frightening comes from misunderstanding what anxiety is actually trying to do. The more you understand it, the less power it has. And if today's episode has helped you understand anxiety a little differently, perhaps there's somebody else who'd benefit from hearing it too. So do feel free to share it with them. So thanks very much for listening. I hope you found benefit from it. I'll see you in the next episode, and you take care until then.